Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel at NDN TV Nigeria. Click on the subscribe button and be the first to get notifications.
Advocates of sustainable development in the Niger Delta have warned against the negative consequences of exploiting the region's natural resources for economic development without due regard for environmental protection. Speaking through a public lecture organized by publishers of the Environment Outreach, a quarterly environment and development magazine recently in Port Harcourt, they called on the federal government and its regulatory agencies in the oil and gas industry to redouble their efforts in enforcing extant environmental laws that are in place to protect vulnerable communities in the Niger Delta. Correspondent Ekana Amefori has the details.
The list of participants at the just concluded 12th annual public lecture organized by publishers of the Environment Outreach magazine in Port Harcourt read a roll call of notable environmentalists, policymakers and academics. In his exploration of the theme of the lecture, Balancing Economic Development with Environmental Protection, Director General of the National Environmental Standards Regulations Enforcement Agency, Professor AKUGHA, who was represented by South-South Zonal Director of the agency, Mr. Jacob Ayuba, as guest speaker, noted that environmentally unsustainable methods of resource exploitation had been largely responsible for resource depletion, loss of livelihoods, widespread poverty and persistent conflicts across the country. Participants at the public lecture listed Nigeria's major ecological problems to include desertification, erosion and flooding. They, however, maintained that the impact of hydrocarbon pollution on communities in the Niger Delta was comparatively higher, having recorded untold biodiversity and livelihood losses since the commencement of crude oil and gas production in the region. In the last 7 decades, the federal government through the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) and its joint venture partners have raked in billions of petrodollars from oil exploration in the Niger Delta, at the expense of oil-producing communities that have had to contend with severe ecological devastations and widespread poverty. Professor of Development Studies at the Rivers State University, Jason Osai, holds the federal government responsible for the plight of oil-producing communities.
The oil companies are not doing well, but the blame goes to the government. The federal government is not setting stringent standards for them to follow.
Publisher of the Environment Outreach magazine, Chief Noble Akenge, said its 12th annual lecture was organized to emphasize the importance of environmental sustainability in the drive for economic development.
We're also taking care of the environment. In the environment where we are making the money, the environmental considerations must be put into consideration before you develop. That's why we said let's look at balancing economic development and environmental protection.
High point of the event was presentation of awards to outstanding individuals and organizations that have been at the vanguard of the campaign for environmental justice in the Niger Delta. Producer of Inside the Niger Delta, Mr. MAMODE AKUGHA, was also presented with an award in recognition of his consistency, strong commitment and leadership in promoting awareness of environment and sustainable development issues in the Niger Delta over the years.
Inside the Niger Delta.